There's some sporadic activity, but the main ground offensive we expect could come within 12 hours. This million people who live in Gaza City have been given the deadline to leave, but for the elderly, for the sick, for people in hospitals, it's creating already a humanitarian crisis, and that's before the Israeli ground offensive begins. Already entire neighbourhoods have been wiped out by the Israeli bombing over the last 5 or 6 days. It's been heavier than any war beforehand. So the conditions in Gaza are absolutely miserable.
The UN has condemned this. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is working with Israel to secure what they're calling safe areas. Where are these safe areas that more than 1 million people living in Gaza can go?
Well, it's a small place anyway, but it's clear from what the Israelis have done, they have said everybody should evacuate south of Gaza City. So essentially move into the lower half of Gaza City. Now, the significance of that is it suggests that the Israeli army is going to try to go all the way into Gaza City, which is something it has always been reluctant to do because urban fighting, guerrilla fighting, fighting with buildings, and you don't know who's around the corner or snipers in the buildings. So this is shaping up to be like we haven't seen any other war in Gaza.
Before we look at the implications of that, just sticking with the humanitarian issue, we know that there is the Rafah corridor with Egypt. Are there any humanitarian safe corridors where these people living in Gaza can actually get out?
Well, no, there's not. It's almost impossible to leave through the Rafah crossing into Egypt anyway. So basically people can't get out. As David Cameron said when he was the UK Prime Minister, Gaza is the world's largest open-air prison. 2.3 million people squeezed into half the size of Canberra. That's the dimensions. And then the roads are bad, trying to get people south, the chaos of trying to get sick people, children, and I don't think the 1 million will be able to get out in time. So I don't know whether the Israelis will go ahead with that 24-hour deadline, but certainly it's probably the grimmest it's ever been. It's in darkness tonight, no power. Slowly, the Gaza Strip is starving to death. There's no food getting in, there's no water, there's no fuel, there's no medicines. So they're not getting any water at all. There's no fresh water to drink. So I don't know how long this can go on.
And though that blockade has been going now for almost a week, hasn't it? So you would imagine that the generators that the area was relying on are all but running out.
That's right. In fact, the blockade has been going on for 16 years, a partial blockade by Israel. But the full blockade, as you say, has been going for a week where nothing gets in there. There is no fresh water anymore. There's no food getting in there. So they're relying purely on what supplies they may have had.
If we can turn now to the implications of the ground offensive in Gaza, you're foreseeing that it's perhaps going to be a conflict that hasn't been seen there before to the scale that it's at. What are the implications of that for the surrounding countries? And with that, I'm asking particularly regarding Iran and its links to Hezbollah.
Well, Catherine, the US has moved their aircraft carrier, of course, one of the aircraft carriers, to the eastern Mediterranean. That's a message to Iran. And Hezbollah will be watching carefully the ground offensive. And the thing to watch in the next 12 or 24 hours will be how does Hezbollah respond to the ground invasion? They'll either not do much at all, or they will unleash a big barrage from southern Lebanon on the order of Iran. Now, if that happens, then we have a major confrontation in the Middle East because Israel, I think, will strike Iran. Israel's in the mood at the moment under Benjamin Netanyahu where they're going to hit back hard against anybody who attacks them.
And there's been isolated incidents as well. I was reading, I think, on Reuters, Israeli shelling struck a Lebanese army observation post on the border there. So there's small incidents breaking out on borders with certain countries.
That's right. Plus there's violence breaking out in the West Bank, which is not that far behind me here, and in East Jerusalem. There was someone shot dead just down the front here in a little village called Wadi Jos down below earlier today. And there's on average 5 to 7 Palestinians being killed a day in the West Bank. So, and things are very, very grim.